Good. All right, everybody. We got Brett Banify back on with us today from the BSV Blockchain Association. It's going to be a great day. We're going to go through all the latest and greatest stuff right now with the with what's going on with some of the Craig Wright stuff and everything BSV and just into see where the conversation goes, man. So Brett, good to have you back, man. How you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me on the show, Gavin.
Good, awesome, man. Really happy to see you again. One of the things that is I want to get right into it that is pressing is that Craig Wright he filed a new case, and he's now suing BTC Core for passing off his Bitcoin. It's the same case, similar to the same case he filed in 2022. The Kraken answered, and it's relevant to our conversation here today because one of the things that we talked about on a prior show was the royal fork. Now, before I go into my position on how it may relate, this which is going to come under promissory estoppel that Craig is alleging. So before I go into that, would you kind of take us back into what you remember talking about with what this royal fork is that he's talked about before in the past?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think this relates back to some comments that he's made, I believe maybe in his Slack channel. Latest that I saw them is there's a individual on X that's called, I think, Truth Machine. And recently he shared some of the content. So if you have a chance, maybe you can go over and check that out, where it's actual screenshots of the comments. But yeah, they have to do with certain, we've always heard that, Craig really appreciates the, Sun Tzu's art of war. That, we've seen him make statements, like when you are strong, appear weak, etc. Um, and I think it relates to that. So um, it's a chess term, first of all. So it has to do with putting your pieces in position on the board in such a way as they simultaneously achieve two objectives. So the primary objective is obviously to attack the enemy king, but the secondary objective, if you can't do that directly, is you want to weaken the forces that are guarding that king. And so what you do in chess is you force your opponent to make critical decisions where they can't falter even by the slightest. So if you imagine this in, terms of, like someone on a high-rise building or something like this, walking a tightrope cable that's strung between two buildings, you really don't have the ability to make even the slightest little miscue there. You have to take the exact correct line of action. And effectively, what you are forcing your opponent to do is to make these series of critical must move choices where any move potentially is impending doom. Yeah, that's the metaphor when it comes to chess. What you're doing is you're putting your opponent into a critical position where they must sacrifice some material in order to preserve their king. But to extend the metaphor out to maybe I can imagine sort of what Craig's thoughts are on this is, first of all, we have to think about the framework for what he's actually looking to accomplish. I don't need to tell you, Gavin, but we live in some desperate, strange times right now. There's a concerted effort. I think there's a lot of people who are worried about captured regulatory agencies. We saw Robert F. Kennedy talking about that at a recent Trump rally. We saw a lot of and worry and concern about deep state manipulation. The circumstance with the Democratic nominee in this year's election, it was very strange in so far as Biden, who was clearly not really fit for purpose, was trotted out there for a good long while until it became too late to maybe elect a democratically chosen alternative through a democratic primary process. And so what you got was basically an appointee, an unelected appointee in Kamala. And this is not necessarily new because we've had presidents who've been impeached in their term, or have been assassinated, or had some illness in term. And so, of course, you have someone that wasn't necessarily elected, but that was second in command, that has to assume the power, and that's understandable, right? And under extreme dire circumstances. But what we see, and I think this goes beyond just this political lens of today's times, but what we see is really the increasing use of these almost fabricated circumstances that warrant overreach of executive power. And typically what happens is that in those moments, the overreach, first of all, it doesn't want to go away, right? So now all of a sudden you're doing all these things that you didn't necessarily have to do before, taking off your shoes and pulling off your belt at the airport, and all of these things that once you have some overreach of power, now it tends to want to stick around, and it gives a lot of reasons for why it needs to stick around. But you're seeing that it's looked at as a way to introduce changes to our system of governance, including our ability to self-select who governs us. And what I think you're seeing here, and this goes back even to the circumstances of the manipulation of the media, and that's why it relates to Bitcoin as a truth ledger, where information is shared publicly and immutably. You see the ability that these vested interests that have an interest in controlling the narratives, including ensuring that fear is being induced in people, and that when they have this fear induced in them, they're much more willing to take these grave extremes that they may otherwise reject. If everything's going honky dory, and you're being asked to take this this sort of medicine that hasn't really been tested, and this vaccine that is like being run through under these grave circumstances, most people, if everything's going great, they're going to reject those types of actions. So what you're seeing, and I think what Craig in some ways is really calling out, he's up against, is this like large scale technocratic institutions that have identified that these fabricated circumstances of fear and things of that nature, those are ingredients that they can use to try to hang on to as much power as possible, and to try to limit and restrict the ability for people to localize and to create self-ordinances and things of that nature to govern themselves, right? They want a passive, docile group. And we've seen this for hundreds of years. This is nothing different. But what you just see in today's times is you see the increase capacity for these institutions to inflict their will and to get what they want, because of the fact that we live, first of all, in such divisive times. It's very easy to say you either side with us or you're against us, things like that. But also, the capacity that technology has to really carve and shape out that narrative is massive. And so, I see Craig in some ways as really standing up against this hegemony of power that wants to that has held on to its day in the sun for thousands of years at this point, really wants to ensure that it continues to survive. And what we could see here is the normalization of the localization of smaller groups that are using a emergent technology like blockchain to be able to record data that maybe otherwise they may rely on a centralized institution for. Like, for example, we have statutes that relate to all types of laws, and we trust these institutions to maintain those statutes, so that someone can't sneak in the middle of the night and change change one of the laws just because that it benefits them, right? We need to make sure that we have immutability with respect to how we live with each other. And what I think think you see with blockchain is maybe the ability to localize that a lot more without necessarily relying on these power institutions that naturally form these like top-down control structures.
Well, a couple of points that you made there, Brett, about the three-letter agencies. First of all, that it's not an overreaching statement to state that the agencies were have been controlled or have been taken over. I think is the word you use, because I mean that's come out in Congress now. We know that that's come out in Congress with the Twitter files, and we've seen that, and we've also seen that in executive orders in I think it was 2017, and all the way back even into I think 1961 or 62, and also even in the Reagan terms, I think it was around in 1983. So we do know that there's been problems with the three-letter agencies being completely taken over. And so that being said, I mean that's where Bitcoin comes in and hopefully can bring truth, shine the light on things. And be this truth machine that you mentioned. But back to this royal fork concept, I want to read this part here. So Craig's filed this case, and he's saying that BTC Core is passing off as Bitcoin. Now, let me just give you a little background. A lot of people say, "Oh, I thought he already lost the case about Satoshi." Okay, this case has nothing to do with Satoshi Nakamoto. Craig, in this case, is saying that he is an investor and he was a developer of Bitcoin. He built businesses on it and he invested a bunch of money to build his businesses on it. And what he's saying is that the MIT license that Satoshi Nakamoto, basically was utilizing it under, it said that sure, anybody can take this protocol. It was open source and they can make other versions of it, Ethereum or Litecoin, and that's okay as long as it's called something else. But what he's saying is that this other thing, which is different, because we know because of the actual wallet addresses, we know Bitcoin wallet addresses start with number one. That's always been that way since the beginning. That's an easy way for any newbie or just anybody to tell. Look at your wallet address. If it says number one on it, it's Bitcoin. If it says something else, then it's not Bitcoin. That's just an easy way to tell. So we see that. And so he's just saying, hey, look, this group BTC Core is saying they're Bitcoin, but they're not wallet address number one. They're doing something else, and they shouldn't be doing it. And he's saying that this whole concept of promissory estoppel is going to kick in against them. That, I believe, is the royal fork. And so basically what it says is this. Promissory estoppel, it's a presumption that a change in common law. So basically basically the ordinary meaning and such indicates that Satoshi's words should be understood in their ordinary and plain meaning, and suggests that in a technical sense that Satoshi's statements clearly conveyed a promise, this is the allegation, that the protocol would remain unchanged. And if it's clear and unambiguous that Satoshi's words were a promise that the protocol would remain this specific way and not to be changed, then that promise can't be broken. It's kind of like the concept of a last will and testament. When somebody writes a will, the decedent says, this person is going to get my inheritance. The court can't go in there and change it and say that somebody else should get it now, because they're stopped. That person, Satoshi, apparently, he's not around to make this anymore. So he can't change whatever he wrote at that time. And so the concept is that whoever, if it's clear what he said, then BTC cores is stopped. They're stopped. Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of the concept here about this potential royal fork. So back to you, Brett.
Sure. And I'll just add a few thoughts on that I think, really caused some confusion, which that is that, Satoshi Nakamoto is a pseudonym. And, there's this idea that, that if a pseudonym, if a statement is made by a pseudonymous person, then it doesn't, we can throw, now, for example, if we knew who Satoshi was, if Satoshi was, we knew exactly who it was. We had, there was no dispute about that. Right. And then, so Satoshi said, this system has to operate this way. then it would be very clear. Like, let's just use the example of Walt Disney or something like this, right? Like Walt Disney says like, hey, before I die, I am going to hand over the Disney company, but it's being handed over under these terms, that it's going to continue to operate in this way, it's going to maintain parks, etc. And so obviously, like you mentioned, I think the last will and testament is a really great parallel, because you can't take a photocopy of this last will and testament and then white out a section of it and then get a group of your friends and say, hey guys, we're going to go over here and we're going to all sit around this table together and we're going to decide that where he put in his son's name, I'm going to white that part out, I'm going to put my name, and then if enough of us agree that this is the real document, even though it's a photocopy, it's clearly a photocopy, then we can march into Disney's headquarters and say, you're get out of my chair, right? I mean, that's ridiculous. But yet that is what is being proposed with the idea. And I think a lot of this idea relates back to this concept that a pseudonymous person doesn't actually have, the same rights that maybe, or the same expectations of the fulfillment of those, of that estoppel, like you're pointing out, that maybe a person in law would. Well, and that's partially because, it's like when the cat's away, the mouse plays, right? If Walt Disney died, and I went through all that process and I copied his last will with the photocopier and I whited it all out, and maybe his son, who was supposed to inherit the company, can go to court and can say, hey guys, like, what are we doing here? This guy's crazy. I mean, it's clearly a photocopy, right? So it's the threat that I'm going to get caught by the person who it's actually supposed to go to, that makes it so that it's a threat of court activity that makes it so that I can't basically live in the wild, wild west with vigilante justice and just decide me and my photocopier and my little whiteout pen are gonna rewrite everything, right? There's an implicit threat there. But with a pseudonymous character, right? Especially if you take this idea that Satoshi is already dead or that he'll never come back, or maybe the most dangerous idea of all is that Satoshi actually wanted BTC and that this is the fulfillment of Satoshi's wishes. I think that they've sort of given up on pushing that narrative. Although, you'd be surprised how, even though they no longer outline that narrative and that they acknowledge that they've completely deviated the system, it has nothing to do with Satoshi's design, there's still so many people like Chinese whispers as it goes down the line, that they have no clue, really. They don't know what they're talking about, and they're defending a system that is actually really completely detrimental to them, because of the fact that it represents this possibility of cheap and easy gains in terms of, okay, well, we're gonna, the number's gonna keep going up, so I'm gonna defend that system even though it has all these flaws with it.
Right. And, just to clarify something, Brett, for everybody, I mean, it's not that you or I are against what the people are doing or in any of these protocols, for example, in BTC. I mean, I think it's great they want to do that. I would support it. But the claim is they're using the name Bitcoin. That's the problem. And that if they want to do that, that's fine, but just don't use the name. Okay. And that's really the major issue, because it's confusing to the public when Joe Sixpack, he wants to buy Bitcoin and he thinks he's getting Bitcoin from the white paper.
Right. And partially this has to do with really extremely deep and nuanced technical minutia, right? In terms of what actually defines Bitcoin and the original promissory estoppel, you may say the original protocol, Satoshi's declaration that protocol be set in stone. This requires really peeling back the layers of the onion quite deeply. And the example that I always use is like a Ferrari, right? You go to the car dealership and you buy a Ferrari, right? It has the little horse on the front. It has the it's red. It has the little yellow insignia on it and everything. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it looks like a Ferrari. It's only really when you go underneath the machine and you have a level of proficiency and expertise when you look under it and you see that the whole thing is made out of rock candy, it's going to melt the first time you drive it through the snow, then then you say, no, this isn't a Ferrari. Well, there's a bunch of people standing around. First of all, they're selling them on the corner. They're selling them for the same price as a Ferrari, or in some cases, a lot more than the price of a real Ferrari. And they're saying, well, what do you know about what a Ferrari is? To me, it looks like a Ferrari, and to this guy, this knucklehead over here, he thinks it's a Ferrari, so don't mind your business. And this is great. This is the perfect business scenario and the business case when you don't have to use it. So if you have to actually get in the car and drive it, then a real person would go, this isn't a Ferrari. Like, it doesn't, it goes 1-2 miles an hour. Like, obviously it's not Bitcoin. I'm sitting in the driver's seat and it doesn't do what Bitcoin does. Like you said, the wallet's not beginning with 1. There's all these reasons. But that's why they want to push this narrative of, well, you're not supposed to use it, right? You're supposed to park your Ferrari in your driveway, and then it's going to 10x, and then once it 10x's, you sell it to the next knucklehead. And yeah, this is a big, everybody's going to go home happy. I think, Gavin, you're from San Francisco. You've seen these types of bubbles appear, and when we look back on them after they burst and stuff, you look back on them and you think, like, who would have ever fell for that? I mean, it's so obvious now, 1-2 years down the line, looking back, that of course, a Ferrari that's made out of rock candy, it's not going to be worth $10 million in 6 months. But it's like
while you're in it, though, it's different, man. It's like while you're in it, like I remember being involved in the 2000.com, 2001. I was selling furniture at Macy's in college, and I just remember, oh yeah, the rush. And people are buying furniture. Like, this is great. This is going to go on forever. This is great. I never would have seen it crashing. Never.
Yeah, the great times are so great, and it's that pull, that urge. The more that you start to achieve success, there's 2 ways that you can magnify that success. You can either try to go back to the drawing board and 10x your efforts, and really try to expand in a way that is structurally sound. Or you can try to minimize your effort. You go, well, I used to make $1,000 a day spending 10 hours working. Well, now if I could spend $1,000 a day only working for 5 hours, right? So it's not about adding to what you're doing and increasing your work, your proof of work, right? It's about doing less and trying to get the same returns. And that's the problem of trying to find the greater fool theory, right? Because eventually you run out of corners to hide in, and you gotta come to the center of the room, and the lights are all on, and you realize that everybody else figured it out, that is a depreciating asset, and you didn't know because you didn't actually get under the hood and look at whether or not the Ferrari can actually ride.
So a couple of things I want to ask you about. One is you would reply to a post here with Aaron Acosta, and you and I were both replying to it, and it was about a post that he found that he said that was from Satoshi, was either a letter or an email about how Satoshi had written very specifically that the protocol is not supposed to change. You remember seeing that one? And you were like, hey, where was that? And I don't know if Kurt responded or not, but like that's the type of stuff. And my response to it, so it said something along the post of like saying the protocol is set, it was very specific about, and I can't find it right now, but it was about very specific. And then my reply to it was, well, if that all posts by Satoshi, other than what were actually embedded into the blockchain, are pretty much disputable. So this post is either genuine, and they're all genuine, or none of them are genuine. Okay. So yeah, because you can't say that, oh, well, that email is good and that, because there really isn't any other way to verify it, So what are your thoughts on that one? I know you replied to it, or if there's anything that you want to talk about on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really important, the understanding this content, why the protocol is to be locked. First of all, when we are talking about, the BSV blockchain, its capabilities, it's the original Bitcoin design, and now known as BSV blockchain. we're talking about something that has the capability from a technical perspective to, last thousands of years into the future. I don't know if you saw this, but there was recently a scientific discovery made, and Craig talked about this, where the shortest route between 2 points was algorithmically determined. And this it's a optimum algorithm. Okay, so what that means is when we're looking at locations, let's say that I'm in such and such Nebraska, and I'm trying to come down here where I live to Colorado. There's many different routes that I can take, right? But there's only one shortest route. But how you calculate that shortest route, there's lots of different ways that you could do it. You could, first of all, you could test it all in theory. You could take every route, right? And then you could come back. And so you take this one, then come back, then take that one, then come back, right? And, all of these things, but there's really just like a chessboard, there's infinite numbers of different ways that you could do it, right? What this guy recently discovered is that there's an optimally, ideal way to determine the shortest distance between 2 points. And what's interesting about that is that if we imagine that in thousands of years in the future, if this is an optimum algorithm, then you're talking about even with modern, imagine 20,000 years from now or something like this, all of the modern computing that you have the ability to do much faster processing, et cetera. But you can never improve on an optimum algorithm. I mean, algorithms have to do with processing how information gets sorted and ordered. It doesn't matter if you can do it faster or if you can do it in larger quantities if you already have the ideal solution. So what I'm proposing here is that BSV blockchain is the optimal digital cash solution. So when you're talking about this, it's very important to understand why the protocol must be protected and locked. Because what you don't want to happen, and this if you imagine that a king, back in the old days in England or something like this, right? Or picture a monarchy, your favorite monarchy, and a king comes up with the optimal way to rule his whatever the land is. He comes up with this optimal way, and then he passes away, and it goes to the son, right? And the son thinks that he is smarter than everyone. He thinks he's wiser than everyone. He starts tinkering with the optimal way that the society is to be structured. If we look back, I realize as I'm telling this story that I truly believe this is related to Craig's determination that the optimal way to organize a society is through capitalism. But capitalism, it breaks down at these very low levels, right? So you have 35-cent payments, and suddenly you cannot make a payment. If I'm buying a service or a good from you, Gavin, for 15 cents, I can't do it, because if it costs me 35 cents to make the transaction, then it's suboptimal, right? So the limit on the payment, the micro payment, the micro transaction, it creates this friction barrier that actually diverts. I'm going to take another tangent here and tell a quick story about one of my favorite people, Buckminster Fuller. He talked about the trim tab. So trim tab is, if you imagine, how a giant Navy ship might operate, right? It operates with a rudder, but the rudder's not in the back of the ship. The rudder's actually in the center of the ship, right? Because it doesn't steer the ship. In other words, it creates a pivot point that the ship moves around. And so how this operates is that the trim tab, you can imagine as a straight, as a straight rudder, but what happens is a very, very small portion of that rudder creates a little friction point where now it's faster for the water to come this way than it is this way, because this way it's hitting that pivot point. And so so the water is getting stuck on one side of the rudder. And what that does is it actually builds enough momentum that the entire vessel, an entire battleship, can spin around this one pivot point, even if that pivot point might be, tinier than, the edges of my sunglasses, right? Because it only takes one the beginning of one friction point, and that friction point can ripple through the entire rest of the system. Well, this is what I believe Craig's vision is that this friction point of the micropayment, where it cannot go below 35 cents, that actually, we see a lot of people giving capitalism, this really hard time, like it's actually responsible for a lot of the woes in the world, etc. And what I think Craig's argument might be is that it's actually not capitalism that's the responsible for all of those woes, etc. But what it is that it breaks down at a certain point. And where it breaks down, you cannot just have nothing there, right? It's an economy. So, you have to create like an estoppel, so to speak, to go back to that term, so that but it's that the estoppel becomes a friction point that actually cascades all the way up. And it's like, if you're building a building, and you build it, 3 stories or 4 stories or 5 stories, if it's not 100% level, but it's only 5 stories high, it's not such a big deal. If you build a building that's 10,000 stories high and it's not quite level at the bottom, that is going to make massive cascading effects that go all the way up the entire structure. And so I really think that what Craig's vision is, and why he is so adamant and insistent about the protocol being locked, about all of these different things, is because it is an optimal system for digital cash that includes the ability to allow basically the capitalist structures to optimally orient and structure society. And that once the son gets involved and starts tinkering and says, then he puts his friends in charge, and like next thing you have basically like, you have a mafia system, because it's not about letting the natural processes of human trade bubble up into create these brilliant, great relationships with each other, but it's really about localized power and inflicting will, and about might makes right.
Well, lock protocol is not just it's those points are true, but it's also, a lock protocol is required for one of the elements to making it a digital commodity. And so without having the protocol locked, now you're over into a different subset of law. And if you're into securities law, then you got to give all these notices and requirements and all this stuff. But as a digital commodity, because it's a locked protocol and there's a fixed token supply, right? And the creator was pseudonymous. There's no central point of origin. There's no central point of control. All of these things, it all fits in. It's a true digital commodity. And so that lock protocol element must remain. Otherwise, it's no longer a commodity, and it's thrown out, so
that's absolutely right. Yeah. And, the fact of being a commodity gets it out of all of these problems. Like, for example, you need money transmitter licenses. I live in the West in the United States. And, for example, Kansas City, there's Kansas City, Missouri, and then there's Kansas City, Kansas, right? This is the same city, but it's in 2 different states, right? And there is a dividing line that goes right down that city. So on one street, literally, it's Kansas, and on the other street, it's Missouri. Now, can you imagine how insane it is that you might be a kid that lives right on that border, and you're mowing your lawn on one side, then you're going over to your neighbor's lawn, you're mowing the lawn. They're giving you $20 to mow the lawn. You're walking over the state border to your house across the street. Well, effectively, what you've just done is you've crossed state lines with money. Like that requires a license. Like all this stuff. So I mean, it's insane that you would think that this is actually a requirement, but. You don't have, if you walk across state lines with silver in your pocket or something like that, even though silver technically is money, we can go down that road too. But you walk along across state lines with some bullion, some rough bullion in your pocket. That's a commodity. You don't have, there's no declarations. There's nothing that you need to do about, you're not carrying any money across state lines, because what you're carrying is a commodity. Same way you can be carrying a can of beans across state lines, and beans are a commodity. So when you're transmitting bitcoins locally, or transmitting across the blockchain, across state lines, when that asset, the underlying asset, is a commodity, that's not considered to be a money that's being transmitted across. And you bring up a really great point. It is precisely because no one can go in there and tinker with it, just in the same way that the sun can't tinker with the optimal way that the king has decided the jurisdiction to be run, right? Because once you get in there and you start messing with stuff, it's the exact same way that happens with the Constitution and with the founding nature of our country. You get in there and you start saying, okay, well, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I don't know. Let's just leave that, like, some of those parts out, and let's just say, you have the right to life, search, seizure. Like, let's throw some other ideas, like replace these liberty ones, and and you need a foundational framework from which, it's when you can you build on bedrock, the bedrock of liberty, the bedrock, as we were describing before, of free exchange and free trade, and using a commodity, that can't be essentially manipulated from the inside. But it's activated by the commercial interests of those agents that are acting on top of it. It's just the same way that you live on a plot of land, and it's not the land's job to grow you great fruit, right? It's not the land's job to grow you great apple trees, etc. It's your job as the steward of that land. You want to make sure that if there's bugs on there, you get them off. If the right types of apples aren't growing, that you take a look at that, right? So the businesses, when you build on a bedrock and a foundation, it's the economic interests of those layers that are on top that while they cannot manipulate the protocol, they cannot inflict their will, and might doesn't make right, but they do have an economic incentive to ensure that the network is operating profitably for them. But it's at economies of scale that this actually becomes a benefit to the rest of the world, because now what we have done effectively is outsource the difficult tasks of record keeping and immutability.
Yeah, well said. I mean, there's an article by Kurt Walker Jr. on the CoinGeek site here recently. Really goes into detail about some of those points that you made. He's kind of doing an analogy on these different protocols. I'll post a link in the description below, people to check it out. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about also was, have you noticed? But looks like it was today. This has been happening, but this is rather big news. Looks like today, the Bitcoin wallet address that was created in January, looks like January 2009, only 10 days after Bitcoin's first block, they just sold 50 BTC, and they moved 50 BTC. I mean, it's been happening a lot, but that's one of the really early ones. So what are your thoughts about this? I mean, is this Satoshi moving his BTC? I mean, this is from 2009, 10 days after Bitcoin started. And it's just BTCs, not moving BSV. What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. And yeah, you can, because that's part of having a public ledger, is that we can all see this. But it's also one of the unique properties of Bitcoin that it is pseudonymous. So we see that it is a person that, we know that it was 10 days after. We don't know who it is. And, this is one of the key advantages of a public ledger. It actually is what I believe is the key innovation and value of Bitcoin, now BSV blockchain. It is the perfect intersection of public and private responsibilities. There are certain responsibilities that it's required that they be public, right? Because if we have, this is the problem with like the three ledger agencies, right? Is because, maybe they start off with really America's best interest in heart, et cetera, right? But, just like the nepotism that exists in all different types of situations, right? You get people into positions of power that maybe they aren't the best qualified, or maybe they're not the most capable. And what you do is it's just like Chinese whispers, right? It goes as the apple falls further and farther from the tree, and as it's less and less economically incentivized and more about who you know and who you rub elbows with, et cetera, then what you do is, again, you get wildly diverted off course with just the littlest trim tab there. There's a large amount of the information that it's required for the public's best interest to be public. But what isn't in the public's best interest is for us to have actual knowledge to say, okay, who exactly is that? Because if that were the case, then basically, I could decide
There'd be no
that
privacy.
exactly. You made a payment to an agency or to a political group that I disagree with, and I become the governor of the state and I have access to that information. I can go after you now. So it's this perfect balance between the responsibilities and the requirements of public data with the responsibilities and the requirements of private data. So the fact that, I think we can make a reasonable assumption that maybe it is Satoshi. I especially love the fact that whoever keeps moving these coins, they're never moving the BSV, right? Because, in the long-term vision, I mean, it'd be like, okay, so you go and visit this beautiful land, and you see a gorgeous snake, and you're thinking like, oh, I want to bring that home for my son, like put it in a little glass container in his room or something like that. Well, which one are you going to bring your son? This snake, or are you going to bring the snake skin? The snake skin is not the snake, right? And what we see is BSV blockchain. That is the snake. That is the reptile. What we see is that it can produce multiple sets of skin. It produced the BTC set of skin. It can produce the BCH set of skin. I think there's Bitcoin Gold. There's Bitcoin Diamond. There's fractal,
Well,
right?
it produced the entire industry. I mean, everything
Exactly.
is a creation from it, whether or not it's now you kind of using the name or whether, I mean, even things like what's called Digibyte, Litecoin, these are literally just copies of the protocol, but they're doing it legally because they're not passing off with the name,
Exactly.
Exactly.
So if someone's going to pay you, $70,000 for a snake skin, and you have the real snake that can produce the skin again next year, I mean, which one are you going to get rid of? So, I mean, I think the writing is on the wall for those that are paying attention, for those that are really looking into this stuff. But it's just like anything, right? We're not talking about what can we do to maximize our interest for 2025. We're talking about thousands of years of building the bedrock for the foundation of a free exchange society that benefits those who do the work as opposed to benefits those who are born into positions of power. I think if we could achieve that's a huge thing. If we could even achieve 30% or 50% of that lofty goal, then I think it's worth pursuing. But what I really truly believe is that, we're going to go way beyond 50%. It's going to be huge. We're going to have the whole, global economy all operating because it's the most it's the optimal network. It's the optimal cash network.
All right, so 5 minutes left. I mean, what's going on with Teranode for people who don't know about what that is? I mean, it's the well, what is Teranode exactly, and what's going on with it?
Yeah, so when Bitcoin launched, it launched on with meager means. I think even Satoshi, if you look at his old writings, he indicated he wasn't even sure if it was going to survive, if it was going to be rejected, if the system. I mean, he theorized that it would all work perfectly, but just like anything, you don't know until you put it into practice. So, in the beginning, the block subsidy, the reward was quite large. It was 50 Bitcoins per block found. That's why you see this old Bitcoin address selling. Because that was the reward, the Coinbase reward you got for finding that new block and extending the chain. But just like anything, it doesn't jump out, just like when we have a baby, the baby doesn't jump out of the womb and is all of a sudden Albert Einstein solving equations on the chalkboard, right? It needs to have its moments and its lifetime to sort of nurse itself into a position where it can actually start to inflict the innate capabilities that it has. And that's what we see with Bitcoin. We see that the innate capabilities that it possesses are effectively horizontally scalable digital cash for the world, where as it scales up, the economic structures that support it come into being, and that the actual cost to use the network falls. And so we're seeing this emergent leap with the the delivery of Teranode. It's listening on mainnet right now. And what it is, just for a really, clear cut explanation, it is a node implementation. So software. So this is basically the, just like you have, Napster or whatever, type of application that you have, Spotify, right? Spotify is an application that allows you to listen to music. I shared my age there by talking about Napster, I guess, but but imagine, Spotify might let you play one song for free, or one song at a time, but maybe you can build another piece of software that allows you to play, 30 songs in all of your rooms if you live in a big mansion or something like that, right? Well, imagine that the size of your mansion is millions and millions of rooms, right? And you want to play a unique song in each of those. At a certain point, you get this bottleneck of actually the transactional processing capability of that piece of software to be monitoring and keeping track of all of the different data points that are going on in all of the millions of rooms in your mansion. And what we see with Teranode, what it is it's an application that allows for the node. The node is the if we talk about Bitcoin being on bedrock, the node is the part that is literally touching that bedrock, right? Is the one that is keeping track of all the different information, the UTXOs, the outputs, the scripts. It's validating the scripts as the transactions are being spent. Is this allowed to actually be sent to this individual? Is this Bitcoin actually spendable at all, or was it spent a couple hours ago and so we should just ignore it? All of these things, the node is processing all of this information instantaneously, and it's a competitive network because the more quickly it can process this information and collate that information into a recognizable structure that the network understands, and then it uses that structure to extend the basically like the DNA of the blockchain. It extends it by one additional block. Then the more quickly it can inscribe itself or ascribe itself a block reward, and then go on to begin building the next block. Just like if a house developer wants to build their homes as quickly as possible so they can go to the next property and start building.
And so Teranode is going to make Bitcoin go faster, be able to do way more transactions, right? And
in a way, it's not necessarily faster so much as it is like it just, imagine you're going hiking, and you have a little backpack that you put all your gear. Well, it's like a backpack that you can fit the entire state of Alabama.
A giant backpack.
Yeah.
Okay. And how's it going? I mean, I heard Kurt was saying he was testing it over there at Gorilla Pool and it was going great. What have you heard? And what?
Yeah. So, they just like anything, they find little concurrency issues as they're testing it. And but all of these issues, it's in really great hands. The team that has deployed it is extremely capable. They also help build some other really instrumental architecture of the network, because it's not just Teranode, it's also the system arc, how you broadcast transactions, how different services integrate with the network and are able to actually pull and push data onto and from the network, et cetera. And so, but I think that they like the fact that, that they are finding some little concurrency issues, right? Because, it's just like anything. You don't just stroke it with a magic wand and then boom, the whole thing comes out, right? But really, it's the fun of it is saying, oh, we never considered that one niche edge case. Okay, so we have to build in a workaround there. And, but yeah, we're going to see Teranode launched and pushing blocks to mainnet, probably, I wouldn't say in the blink of an eye, but a couple blinks, you might get a
2025. 2025,
2025,
sure.
I think is.
So where can people follow you, Brett?
Yeah, so I'm manifestable. You can follow me on x.com. You can also reach out to me on BSV Discord. It's discord.gg/BSV. And just a huge advocate for this network. Love being on your show, Gavin. Thank you so much for shining a light on all the great projects.
Hey, thank you, everyone. And thank you for coming on, Brett. We'll do it again soon. Be sure to subscribe, hit the ones, everybody. Leave a comment. I'll be sure to read it and get back to you. So, all right, Brett, I will see you at the top and everybody else.